the picture for the biennium. So on page 8 is just the last an illustration of the interest that we've earned over the last 10 years. Obviously, in fiscal year 23, 24, we've benefited from having all of the ARPA money with us, and the revenue surplus allowed us to generate a significant amount of interest income. Again, 25 is another good year, again, because of the fact that interest rates have been higher, longer than planned. So with that, I'm also revising the estimates for 25. So right now, the estimate is 80 million, and I'm increasing the estimate to 90 million just because it's based on how much we've earned, the picture that we have so far, and then what we anticipate to receive over the next 3 months. 26 and 27 again has a lot. Those have a lot of assumptions. Our average cash balance has been decreasing over time, and it's a result of revenues underperforming plan, and also the spending has been continued. So obviously our cash balance has been impacted. If that trend continues, then this estimates, may not work out. But if the plan for the new budget is to adjust some of the spending and obviously regulate some of the imbalance that we have currently, perhaps those estimates will work out. So again, if the possibility, if interest rates stay higher for longer, this numbers will be conservative. But the downside is if something changes, the economic conditions changes, or our cash balances decrease, then these numbers may not work out. But again, a lot of assumptions, but that's what I have for you today. I'll be happy to answer any other questions.
Great. Chris, could you explain again, the treasurer's number falls, if you have your revenue estimate worksheet, the revenue for the treasurer falls under the other category, which is on page 4. That's the, Chris, talk to us what makes up the other category, what goes in that bucket.
So there's currently about 200 other revenue sources. A lot of them come from agriculture, safety. So the Department of Administrative Services collects this other revenue and from the agencies and then report that out. So the estimate comes from the Department of Administrative Services. Abandoned property and the interest right now are some of the highest revenue sources for the other revenue, and that's why the treasurer speaks to that separately. Dana Call, the comptroller for the state, and will provide us a letter for the rest of the other revenue. But again, it's about 200 different revenue sources, some that can come in as small as a couple $100, some that will come in tens of thousands of dollars. But cumulative, that's how you get the other amount of 150 that the House had projected for 25, and then 126 million and 120 million. So if you look at this document, it says worksheet on the front page, and that's what Senator Lang was mentioning, page 4, there's a column L that it says other. When you look at this document, it's going to be row 9, row 9, 16, and 23, which were the House estimates. And in this document, you can see what the governor had proposed for her estimates, as well as what the official plan is for 25 and 24. So what'll happen is that once we get the administrative services number, I'll take what Monica has provided you today, and we'll put it together to make sure that we give you what the actual number should be. And I'll insert it into this document. I emailed this to everybody yesterday, this document as well as 2 others. The one that Senator Rosenwald commented on that has the really big print. This document is just a comparison of the governor to House revenues as what the current, or what we call base revenues, and then any proposed changes is the bottom half. It gives you the general fund education trust fund. You flip the page, it gives you the general fund separately, the education trust fund separately, and then the highway fund and fishing game fund, which are all the revenue streams that you're going to make estimates on by the time you're done.
Thank you, Chris. Questions for the treasurer? Senator Oswald.
Thank you. Thank you. Since the I'm just wondering, I'm looking at your estimate of interest for 27 and 26, but really 27. Since the house, the budget as it came out of the house took half of the rainy day fund out, should we take that $12 million and take away 6 and subtract it from your 41 in our heads?
Right. Thank you for the question. I did I did all that math yesterday. I was trying to see if I needed to do that. And so I decided not to. I decided to leave them the way they are,
Okay.
just because there are, like I said, there are a lot of assumptions here, and I wish it was a quick math, but there's the possibility that interest rates will stay longer, higher longer, and so that will allow us to keep earning. Also, our strategy is, I'm trying to invest a little bit of long term too, to see if we can allow us to maintain that income for a little longer. So it's all of those pieces that I think, even if things change drastically, we might be able to, I'll be able to meet at least the plan,
Okay.
this estimate.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Madam Treasurer, if I understand again, the 25 revenue that you increased, $10 million, that actually results at the end of this biennium, meaning that we're going to take $10 million less from the rainy day fund for our shortfall. So we'll start the new biennium with $10 million more because of her revenue estimate increases for this year. Is
That
that
is
correct?
correct. Absolutely. That's
not in the house budget.
It's not in the House
It is
budget. That
not.
new revenue projection hasn't been made into the House budget yet, which will, again, have a trickle effect to the following year. So we just need to make note of that, that's what's going to happen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning.
good morning.
So I have a question on page 7, where it says all state, local fiscal, it talks about the remaining 375.5 million that needs to be expended. Are you planning to spend it on, and what are the penalties for not spending?
Well, all agencies right now that are responsible for spending all of the ARPA money, that's what they're doing. They're charged with the spending. If we don't spend the money, we need to return it to the federal government. So right now, everyone knows there are contracts in place. They've all been approved. What it means to be all of these funds obligated, that means all of the agencies have contracts and plans to spend this money, and that's what they're doing. So we may see this spending over. I've seen a little bit of a higher spending over the last 3 months, but again, they have another year to spend it, but they need to spend it, otherwise we need to return it.
There's no financial penalty for not, we can return it without financial penalties, right?
Correct. There will be no penalty, but we don't want to return the funds either.
Right, thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't know if you remember, Senator, but at the end of last year, there was a mad dash in September to identify, we had allocated funds that hadn't been actually spent. And so we were trying to figure out which funds are coming back that we'd reallocate to other projects so we didn't have to return the money. And
Exactly.
so we saw from September to November, this mad dash of validating the people that put in for, I'm going to do something with ARPA funds. This is what it is. And we approved it, but then it never moved forward. And so we ended up chasing them saying, is this still a plan? Are you still doing it? Should we still allocate this money for you? And if we didn't, if they said, no, we're not doing that project anymore, then we pulled back that appropriation, we appropriated to something else. So there's some projects that literally were only put on the list in November of last year. So we didn't have to, because it had to be allocated by December 31st. And if it wasn't allocated by December 31st, those funds we'd have to return. So we were able to do the mad dash and get everything reallocated. So.
And I asked because I worked on grants before, and if you don't spend the funds, you actually get a penalty, right? So I was asking if we would.
Thank you. Yes, no penalty, but our preference is not to return those funds.
Any other questions for the treasurer? Seeing none, thank you, Madam Treasurer.
Thank you very much.
Next up is liquor. So again, on our revenue sheet, guys, it's on page 3, row D is the the numbers we're looking at. This one here.
Thank you.
Microphone's all yours, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Joseph Malika, Chairman of the Liquor Commission. With me is our CFO, Tina Deniers. I'll just run you through a quick history here of the Liquor Commission, and Tina will take you on to the numbers. New Hampshire is one of 17 control states in the nation. The three-tier system is in place in those control states, and the value of the three-tier system. The main value that we look at is there's a lot of independence, but the biggest thing is the product tracking. Last 5 years, there's been 11,800 people affected by tainted alcohol, and 4,500 people have died worldwide. That doesn't happen in the United States in three-tier system because our alcohol is watched from production until sale. On page 4, just quickly some competition. Our major competition in New England is Total Wine for the Liquor Commission. A few bullets down, you'll see that they do $6 billion in revenue. They've surpassed Costco as the top wine retailer in the United States. They have 277 stores in 29 states, 11,000 employees, and they now have 12 stores in New England, 4 in Connecticut and 8 in Massachusetts. On page 5, obviously you can talk about the decline in the sales of alcohol across the United States unless you talk about cannabis. Cannabis is a $3 billion industry in 2025 in the 3 surrounding states. The Liquor Commission doesn't take a stand pro or con against it, but we have to recognize that this is where a lot of the expendable dollars that are not being spent in alcohol are being spent in cannabis. And we'll speak to that in a few slides. On page 6, the first time in nearly 30 years that there was a decline in alcohol in the United States in 2023. There was a decline by 2% in spirits sold in the market, expected to be 5.9%. In a few slides, we'll show you that that's actually surpassed those numbers. National global factors on page 7, impacting alcohol. Moderation trends are part of it, non-alcohol growth. For the first time, more Americans are using marijuana on a daily basis than alcohol. 17.7 million versus 14.7 million in 2023. Big anti-alcohol organization called neo-prohibitionists, which have emerged, and obviously the World Health Organization making the comment that no alcohol level is safe in 2023. On page 8 and 9, you'll see industry trends. We've done a heat map for you. You'll look at the Northeast in the dark blue. All the way over to the left, you can see the on and off premise sales for spirits and on and off premise sales for wine. Down 10.5% in the Northeast for spirits, down 14.8% for wine. And you can see our data at the bottom. We're trending a little better than most of the New England states. 9.4% for spirits, 8.2% for wine. And it's just a quick note that there is a number of control states in the New England, obviously New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, and Pennsylvania being the largest. On page 10, you can see that in 2024, the Liquor Commission generated $744.4 million, and we're governed by RSA 176.3 at the bottom. On page 11, divisional responsibilities broken down. I won't go through those. Organizational structure on page 12. Current organizational structure and the proposed organizational structure as of HB 538. That new division of finance and auditing was in the audits in 2018, 19, and 20. We waited to put this position into place until we had launched our next-gen system, the new D365 Microsoft system, which overtook the Mapper legacy system at the Liquor Commission, which was 40-plus years old. So that new position will be in place, and you can see the breakdown there. project summary for you, just of what the next-gen system has done on page 14. The outlet changes on page 15. The biggest here is the last one, is that we're rehabilitating exit Interstate 95 north and south in Hampton. The final red line copy of the purchase and sale is with DOJ for final review at this point. It's in legislation that the funds from that sale will go to pay off the bonds of the Liquor Commission's debt, thus dropping about $4 million a year off of bond payment to the bottom line. On page 16, just some of our locations and just the key point at the bottom that the state-owned locations and the stores that they are. On page 17, the merchandising goals. Obviously, the biggest goal for us is to bring the best products and values to our customers through a positive shopping experience. We've done that in rehabilitating nearly 40 stores since 2014, starting in 2014. On page 18, just some quick web and e-commerce points. We have 125,000 visitors a month to our website. Curbside and in-store pickup are a big piece of what we do now, about 12.2 million a year since its inception in 2020. And the next goal that we're working on now with our partners at DHL is out-of-state direct wine ship. We'll be able to ship product into all of the other states that allow us to sell wine. We have a lot of high-end, very allocated wine that's sold to us here in New Hampshire that isn't available in many states. So we've kind of drawn up a position where we can run a separate business through the Liquor Commission and enhance revenues that way. We're working on that as we speak. On page 19, just Instagram, Facebook, and X followers. Also that we send out 7 targeted emails a month to our licensees and customers. We try to strike a balance between not inundating one's mailbox, but making sure that everybody gets to see what's on sale, ghost drops, one-time buys, etc. On page 20, Google reviews. We're very pleased with those, that 92% of our reviews are 4 or 5-star ratings. The numbers speak for themselves. On page 22, the liquor licenses given through enforcement, on-premise licenses. Oh, did I skip one? Oh, sorry about that. 21 is the 3-prong approach to our enforcement division, which is obviously enforcement, licensing, and education. Sorry, my page was upside down there. And then we'll go on to page 22, which is just the correlation of those licenses to dollars. So on-premise licenses, restaurant, clubs, hotels, 2,100 plus licenses, $95 million in sales. Off-premise, grocery, convenience, and retail wine, 2,100 licenses, $119 million in sales, and the direct ship revenue of 1,369 licenses, with the corresponding 1.2 million in sales. Just a quick note at the bottom, we do have 6,281 licensees that are run by the Enforcement Division. And the revenue brought in by the Enforcement Division last year was $18 million. And the awareness training, which is a huge piece of the education that our Enforcement Division does, 11,000 plus people were trained last year. And through our public awareness events, 135,000 plus people were touched by the Liquor Commission for our education and awareness. Some of those on page 23, Fatal Choices, Mobile Outreach, Buyer Beware. Those are some of the programs that we run. On 24, some of the education that's done. We educate our licensees and our New Hampshire Liquor Commission employees. That's a no-cost, these are no-cost benefit from the Liquor Commission to train employees, licensees, grocery stores, and our employees as well. A lot of education goes on. We find that that's a very important piece of what we do. Sales are important. This is just as important. And That's all my piece. Tina will take it from here. Thank you.
Good morning. So on page 25, you have the HB2 sections related to the Liquor Commission. Sections 267 to 279 is eliminating the Enforcement Division. The House is looking to eliminate the division, which includes 19 full-time positions and 15 part-time positions, with a calculated savings of $3 million annually. It does not include payouts for those employees or the bumping rights for the 6 employees and then the impact that it would have with the rest of the division. The impact in enforcement plays a key role in promoting public safety and preventing the health and well-being of our communities and supporting over 6,000 licensees. This action would deregulate the alcohol and tobacco industry while presenting a substantial safety risk. And it also puts the risk of our licensee sales, which is about $214 million annually. Then there's Section 389, which is repealing the distribution from the Liquor Commission to the Alcohol Abuse and Prevention Fund. And that removes the transfer of $10.7 million to HHS, along with Section 411, which repeals the prohibition of using general funds for the granted advantage. This removes our transfer for the shortfall, and that transfer is about $12.6 million annually. So on page 26, we're requesting to not make any changes to the Enforcement Division and add back the funding from the surplus statement of the $3 million annually, because our revenue numbers are calculated based on the current structure of the commission. They do not take into account any disruptions to the processing of licensees and for the sale of licensees if we eliminate our Enforcement Division. On page 27, this is a breakdown by our customer types so that you can see that on-premise sales represent 12.4% of our category, and off-premise is 15.6%, with our retail being the 71.5% of sales. And then there's the breakdown by spirits and wine by each of those categories. On page 28, net liquor and wine sales to our profits, we have a chart that shows gross profit. Gross profit has been consistently over the last 10 years between 28 and 29%. In the bottom right is the net profit percentage. You'll see that net profit was consistent between 19 and 21%, but in FY24 it decreased to 17%. This is due to increases in expenses. We had the 10% pay raise, which equated to $9.5 million, and then expenses for depreciation for our new next-gen system, which was $5 million. And the commission has had total net profit from inception of $4.6 billion. On page 30, our revenue trends and transfer language for FY24 actuals and then 25, 26, 27 estimates. 24 and 25 are based on the current transfer language with the transfers to the granted advantage in the alcohol fund. So you'll see in 24, we transferred on line 8 to the general fund 109.5. We're estimating in 25 101.7. Depending on how the language passes for HB2, if the language passes as it currently is from the House, the transfer to the general fund for 26 and 27 will be 126.2 million. If the transfers happen to HHS, then you'd be back down to line 8 of 102.9 and 102.3 in 26 and 27. On page
Can we
30.
pause there for a minute?
Sure.
Can we have questions on those revenue projections? You understand in House Bill 2, again, as it says at the bottom of page 30, the House removed 2 transfers out of the liquor fund and put those straight to general fund revenue instead of putting it to, remember, the granted advantages of Medicaid expansion program, I believe, isn't it? Yep. Question.
Thank you. So until last May, there were a lot more people on the Medicaid expansion because federal regulation had not required redeterminations. And the numbers of people on that program have declined pretty substantially since then. I think there were like 90,000 people now there are between 58 and 60,000. Is your $12.6 million projected transfer based on the current number of enrollees in the program? And where does increases in insurance premium tax fit in?
Chris, you want to take that one?
I can take a stab at this. So just for the committees, to remind you that last year you changed how money was being deposited into Granted Advantage. So money used to be transferred from the Alcohol Commission Fund. Now it directly is taken from Liquor Commission and deposited there. The Department of Health and Human Services provides a number, because the statute allows for that, to liquor to transfer that amount of money. And they base it on what they believe their trends will be with the usage on the Medicaid Advantage system. So they've made adjustments for the downshift in terms of people coming off, but they also have had a larger amount of need for the liquor fund since there's not that transfer from the Alcohol Commission Fund anymore.
So are they calculating an increase in insurance premium tax from the managed care contracts?
So the insurance department will transfer anything that relates to the managed, the Granted Advantage, the Medicaid expansion. That is automatically transferred over to HHS to be used to fill the gap between the 90% and 100%. So the state's on the hook for 10% of that Medicaid. So the insurance premium tax, the transfer from liquor, as well as some other small revenue sources that Health and Human Services has. But again, the biggest change for liquor was that in this budget and last budget, they transfer closer to $25 million versus $10 million a year to other entities. So as a result, you see the net revenue to the general fund coming down. Again, that was legislative changes, not something that the liquor or these departments decided to do.
So when we had 90,000 people enrolled, the transfer from the liquor fund was about 12 million or so
So,
to Granted Advantage. Now we've got 1/3 fewer people.
so the RSA 126 AA allowed for the Commissioner of Health and Human Services to go to the Liquor Commission if there was a shortfall. That happened for several years prior to this current biennium we're in, and it was averaging about $7 or $8 million a year of the extra ask. Again, last budget cycle, the legislature changed how money was transferred over to Granted Advantage as it related to the Governor's Commission. So the Liquor Commission would transfer approximately $10 million to the Alcohol Commission, and that's all they would transfer. Then they would hear from HHS if they needed more money. Again, it was about $7 or $8 million. Now they're transferring upfront the $12.6 million as well as the 10.7 to the alcohol. And they still may be on the hook if there's additional need. Right now, the Health and Human Services Department hasn't identified there would be additional need, but statute allows for that still. But again, that's an HHS-related question in terms of the data that drives the numbers.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, Matt, again, keep going. You have a couple more pages, I think.
Well, on page 32, that will just show you the breakdown of the transfers to the general fund, how it has been annually. About 81% goes to the general fund, 9% goes to the Alcohol Abuse Prevention and Treatment Fund, and 10% goes to Granted Advantage. So if you look at the chart on the upper left, you'll see that if those two transfers go away, it would be the $126.2 million that would go to the general fund. Okay, and then the final pages are our charitable contributions. We've contributed with our suppliers and brokers over $4.3 million to nonprofits, and then there's awards and accolades, and we'll be happy to answer any other questions.
So let's go to page 30. Let's take a look at that. So
Okay.
we're looking at revenue projections, assuming all of our revenue projections are always based on current law, not proposed changes in HB2. So the line we're going to be looking at is line 8 on that little spreadsheet that says liquor revenue transfers to the general fund. Again, we work always based on current law, and so those repeals of the transfers to the governor's alcohol commission as well as the Medicaid expansion are still current law. So we're going to leave those as we're projecting revenues the same. So the number we're looking at is 102.9 million, and is for year 26, and then 102.3. That's up from the 25 estimate of 101.7. So while we're looking and when we go to start estimating numbers, that's the column we're going to be looking at. And I guess, Commissioner, my question, is there any reason that those numbers might have changed? Compared, again, we're looking at the House and the number is the same. So from when you were talking in January to now, you haven't seen any trending data that would say that we think the number is going to improve a little bit or decline a little bit, or you think it's going to be the same?
We feel that we're still on track for this same number based on the trends that we were seeing in January and what we're seeing now.
Is this the same number you gave the House Ways and Means Committee?
Correct.
Follow up. Do you have any insight as to why the governor would have assumed a 92.7 million? It seems like a big difference.
Because the numbers we provided in the governor's phase were based on the trend prior to seeing this major decline in the global trends. We provided that numbers to the governor's office, way back months, 6 months prior to that. And then the trend started declining and we saw what the trend looked like for this current year and projected down. And they agreed with the numbers that we provided.
Maybe I misunderstood.
Okay.
We went from 92.7 million.
Yeah.
In the governor's estimate for 25 to now 125 million.
The governor, 92?
That's what it says on my handy big spreadsheet here. So I'm in the restaurant business, so I see
Yeah.
the decline in sales just as much as you do, believe it.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, if the sales are trending down, what was the rationale from going from 92.7 million to 125.6 or 126.2? Seems like a big jump, that's all.
The 92 would be more in line with the 102 that we're looking at now. You can't compare it to the 126 because that's prior to the transfer to HHS. And we did reevaluate the trends that we're currently having. And we are seeing some incline in the restaurant. And we're doing more aggressive sales and increasing our profit to be able to increase the bottom line.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand it was for the transfer. Thank you very much.
Further questions?
Thank you. Going back to what the Enforcement Division brings in, if I understand this chart, brings in like $18 million a year,
That's correct, Senator.
but the HB2 saves $3 million a year by eliminating the Enforcement Division, correct?
That's their goal, yes.
Okay, so we have a net loss of $19 million a year.
Well,
Well, I'm sorry,
no,
no.
Yeah.
15.
15. And obviously, as we've written in here, that doesn't, the payouts to the folks that would be let go and the bumping rights that would need to be satisfied by those folks that have those rights. So yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So thank you. Thank you for taking my question. Just curious about the outlet changes. You opened a new location in Derry and we've relocated the outlets in Nashua and Keene. Who decides where a liquor store goes?
I guess that I do.
So you have follow-up? You just decided where the liquor store goes?
Well, I would say that historically, that the liquor stores are in place in communities that would justify those types of sales. During COVID, we had a number of liquor stores that were closed. We closed 10 or 12 during that period of time. Obviously, profitability is the most important thing, and we look at every community and historically the data that we're given. So that's how those decisions are made.
Quick follow-up?
Oh,
So you're the end-all say-all where a store is relocated, renovated, or put, is what you're saying?
I wouldn't say I'm the end-all, say-all. We have a senior staff and a group of individuals that look at sales trends, marketing. So, but I guess if you want to say the buck stops with me, yes, sir.
Perfect, thank you.
Mhm.
President Roosevelt just asked me, so if under current law, liquor enforcement's still there, we're talking about this $15 million, that's a revenue that isn't really accounted for. If they go away, the revenue goes away. Where do we account for that revenue at?
The revenue doesn't go away because that's for the processing of the majority of it is the processing of the beer tax, but it's going to be remaining with the auditing and the licensing people that are left behind. They're only removing the sworn personnel, but though processing those licenses and keeping the on-premise and off-premise licensees up to standards will impact our sales, and it can impact the processing of those taxes and actual licenses.
And I would say that without having those sworn personnel in place to do the audits and inspections, the revenue will clearly decline. I guess I would akin it to if you have a business that many parts of that business rely on those folks to bring that revenue in, not only the revenue from the $18 million, but the revenue that's equated to those licensees. If those licensees can't be renewed in time, it affects sales and your constituents. And obviously, if those sales are affected, that affects the bottom line as well. That's the slide where I gave you the amount of licenses and the dollar value equated to those licenses.
So I guess what I'm saying is that while the revenue will still be there, the problem is that you've reduced staffing to cover those licenses. There'll be delay in processing. Delay in process will ultimately affect revenue sales.
Absolutely.
Is the way it's being equated.
And I wouldn't say that I would necessarily be certain that that revenue would be there because of those delays involved.
Right. Okay. Does that answer your questions?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, if I might jump in on that as well. The House position was that there was no loss in that revenue. So they assumed that there was no change in the liquor revenue by removing the enforcement sworn officers. The assumption was it would be run similar to as you see LPLC with licensing and certification and the revenues that they collect there and the enforcement that they do for their entities that they license. So again, they didn't make any adjustment downward when they removed the enforcement individuals from the Liquor Commission. So to add them back in finance, it would be a cost of the $3.3 million each year that you would be doing. So you would lose that. They made an assumption you save $3 million in expenditure, so that's $3 million in revenue a year you would see. So you would lose that if you were to add the enforcement piece back.
And with all due respect, Mr. Chair, OPLC does not regulate a controlled substance. This is a lot different than licensing something that a barber shop, et cetera.
I think we can all say that, if you cut staffing by 2/3 and then you expect licensing to occur at the same exact process time, that's probably not a reasonable expectation. It's going to be a delay of some sort, which is going to result in some function, either a licensee not opening as fast as they could, which results in lost revenue, or a licensee not getting renewed in time and potentially has closed door days while they're waiting on it. So I think that's a reasonable argument to be made. Further questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
So actually, just wanted to explain beer tax. We didn't actually cover the beer tax other than just say it's $13 million. So again, our beer tax is a price per gallon. Is that right? Is that how we do it?
Been raised. It's 30 cents a gallon. I think 1994 was the last time it was raised.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that's going to conclude our revenue projections for today. We'll be back next week on Wednesday. We have DRA. Sonia, who else is coming next week? DRA, lottery, Mike Summers. So we have DRA coming for the business taxes. We have lottery coming for the gambling and lottery revenue. We have Mike Summers coming in to talk to us about the hospitality industry. We have someone from the Realtors Association coming in to talk about what's going on in the housing industry. And I thought there was one more. I can't remember who it is. Is it just those four or was there one more? Is it BIA couldn't make it because they have an event that day? Yeah. So I think we have those four coming in to talk about some of the rest of the taxes. And at that point, we'll go through all the letters we received and align them with our revenue worksheet so we can see what the industry, what the agency heads have said relative to. Are we clear on that? Great. We're going to move into our public hearing. So House Bill 696. I'll open a public hearing on House Bill 696 and recognize Representative Ulrey. I'm glad you're over in my committee and me over in your committee. I know last Tuesday was Tim Lang Day in Ways and Means. I spent the entire day as the prime sponsor to every single bill that was in Ways and Means in the House. So now it's your turn.
I don't care. I'm very disappointed. You ran over. That's the House's job to run over. I expected this. No, seriously. Thank you very much. My name is Jordan Ullery. I'm the Vice Chair of Ways and Means in the House. And I'm here to introduce and a co-sponsor of House Bill 696 FN. What this bill intends to do, and it's the result of three and a half years of a commission study on the role of the electric generators. That's a very small section that kind of got isolated when electricity was deregulated. The producers of electricity are not a public utility. They're a private enterprise that produce electrons. Then the electrons are sent out over public utilities and distributed in that fashion. So I think you remember Senator Lang, that the term widgets was used in the process. What we have is a widget manufacturer being charged for something that has nothing to do with widgets other than that is the product. So what the bill does is changes the generators from a public utility to a private business. As a private business, then they would be subject to the business enterprise tax, the business profits tax. Being subject to those two taxes, they are also subject then to SWEPT. Currently, there's a little small complicating factor of pilots, payments in lieu of taxes, that these generators are making to local communities wherein they are situated. Some are across a couple of different communities because of the size of, say, a hydro facility, which will cross a town line or maybe a couple of town lines. I'm thinking of the Moore Dam up north. However, those pilots will expire in 31. This does not take place in this current fiscal year. It takes place, it goes into effect, the law goes into effect in 2027. So you have a time frame to get the towns used to weaning themselves off of the pilots and into the assessing. The assessing is then done by a standard form rather than a competing form. Currently, the area is filled with lawsuits back and forth. No, you can't charge. No, you don't know what the machine's worth. The machine's only yes, and those are serious complications. But what this does is it puts them into the proper accounting category for that kind of assessing to take place. You've got the building, you've got the equipment therein. It makes it just like any other factory, whether it's a clothing and a textile mill someplace, we don't have any more, but, or a widget manufacturer, to use the term that was used. Once the SWEP takes place, the businesses will pay SWEP. And what happens then is my rate, your rate, our neighbor's rates, the amount that's paid is going to go down because of the increased SWEP going in. At the same time, the communities are going to benefit because they're now collecting property tax on that structure. So it's not quite an exact balance, but it's very near a balance. There is a little bit of lag that takes place. It has to take place. But at the same time, it balances out. One of the comments that was made, and I was very proud to be part of that comment, was if Representative Ulrich can agree with Representative Ames, it's going to be a good bill. So this was the commission report, which I urge you to take a brief look at. It's relatively thick. It's got a lot of stuff in it, but the executive summary covers it pretty well. Describes how the entire process works. We had a lot of input. Your chair can attest to that. It was a good debate back and forth with all of the primary stakeholders. The generators, both the small and large generators, were covered in that. With that, that's the bill in a nutshell. It passed out of Ways and Means in a bipartisan manner with a majority vote onto the floor. So, and then the debate on the floor was truncated to PIs. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them. Technical questions, I will refer to the generators.
So we have two more speakers, from the subject. So if you want to hold your questions, we can take it up with them. So, thank you, Representative.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be over here.
Molly, hop up and up.
Good morning. I'm Molly Connors with the New England Power Generators Association. I'm pleased to be back. My written testimony is coming around now. For those who may not see me as often as others, NEPCA, the New England Power Generators, we are the trade association that represents the non-utility owned power plants in the region. Our members own and operate about 27,000 megawatts of generating capacity throughout New England, the vast majority of the power plants in New England. And specific to New Hampshire, our members own and operate about 4,300 megawatts of power generation capacity. They employ about 1,500 people and pay millions in state and local taxes. But before I get too far in this, I understand that there is an amendment that will be coming forward, and I want for the record to show that we are supportive of that. I don't want to jump ahead of it, but I wanted my testimony to reflect that. The bottom line with regard to this bill is that New Hampshire's power plants should be taxed for what they are, which are manufacturing facilities that create a critical product for consumers around New England. In New Hampshire right now, power plants are taxed as if they are owned by the state's utilities, which can recover their costs automatically and in a guaranteed way directly from consumers and ratepayers. That is not the case for the power generators. This is costly, it's inefficient, it's unfair, and it contributes to increased litigation costs for the host communities, for the power plant owners, and for the state of New Hampshire itself. Just a little more context, under current law, our power plants pay two types of property taxes. They pay the local property tax and they pay the utility property tax. They therefore, and I want to emphasize, this is really one of the pain points that we are trying to solve here. They undergo two distinct assessment processes, and then all too often, two distinct abatement processes and two appeals processes. This is in contrast to every other commercial property in the state, which face only 1 point of assessment, 1 point of appeal, and 1 point of abatement. New Hampshire is the only state in the country that subjects power generating facilities to this two-prong assessment process. And really, the fact that generators are subjected to this process is a result of sort of a leftover requirement, if you will, from when generators actually owned power plants. Really, we view this as the tax law catching up with the energy policy of the state. And so really the solution that's in front of you in House Bill 696 is several years in the making. As I think Representative Ulrey mentioned, a legislative commission was established 3 years in a row to address this situation. I was present for all of them and was a member of it. At the conclusion of the third year, the commission recommended that generators should no longer pay the utility property tax because they are not utilities. And instead, they should pay the statewide education property tax, or the SWEPT. Doing so will put the generators in the more appropriate category with other commercial enterprises. And it also takes the Department of Revenue out of the business of assessing power plants, and which critically, it keeps the responsibility of putting an assessed value on the power plants in the hands of the municipalities. So when we look at this bill, I want to encourage you all to think of the power plants from an economic point of view as not utilities, and we encourage you to tax them accordingly. A point that I wanted to make also is that this bill does not take effect until 2027. It does not affect the biennial budget currently going through the process in the legislature. And so we really urge you to adopt this narrow consensus, common sense recommendation of the study commission as encompassed by the bill in front of you, so that we can at least move on from this two-prong assessment process that leads to so much costly litigation. I'm happy to answer questions.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, you're all set.
Thank you.
I'll just, before we bring up the next speaker, which will be Madeline, I'm just going to say, if you guys remember, we had Senate Bill 277, which was my bill on the same exact topic. And we passed that at this committee 5-0 a little while back. It was held by finance. Our bill had some language in it that dealt with the pilot programs. I've spoken to the prime sponsor of this bill. He's in favor of us basically doing a wipe and replace with Senate language on this bill, which would be consistent with our previous votes, just so you're all aware. Madeline.
Thank you, Senator. My name is Malamino, and I'm representing the Granite State Hydropower Association. We're a trade association for small hydropower generators in the state. We also were participants to the study commission for the past 3 years, and we support this bill as the consensus outcome of that study commission. As the previous speaker said, we power generators are local businesses, and we would like to be treated and taxed like other local businesses in New Hampshire. Having to be assessed and pay property taxes both at the state level and at the local level is duplicative and burdensome for small businesses like those that we represent. So we think that this is the right way forward. That's what the commission's recommendation was, and we hope you'll support the bill.
Question for Madeline? Seeing none, thank you. Tom, did you want to speak? I see you in opposition. All right, great. Anybody else like to speak on House Bill 696? We're going to take this up next week in executive session, where we'll exec it out, and I'll have the amendment ready for us. So with that, I'm going to close the public hearing on House Bill 696. I will next come up with a public hearing on House Bill 302. Sit down, Avenue, and take a seat. I will open a public hearing on House Bill 302 and recognize the prime sponsor, Representative Ammon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Senate Ways and Means Committee. For the record, my name is Keith Ammon. I represent Hillsborough District 42, towns of New Boston, Mount Vernon, and Lineborough. And disclosure, I do own digital assets, I do own precious metals, and I'm the chair of the newly formed New Hampshire Blockchain Council, which is volunteer nonprofit. So with that, I'm here to introduce House Bill 302. This bill is enabling for the state treasurer to invest in assets that can counteract inflation. That's basically the gist of the bill. In current statute, the treasurer's enabled to only invest in a small list of super safe assets, so safe that they can never basically beat inflation. So the idea with this bill is to give the treasurer some more tools in the toolbox, not to second guess her judgment, allow her full autonomy than her normal processes for investing. So I'll walk through the bill. It's not a very long bill. And one interesting fact, there's a few other states that are considering legislation similar to this. And just coincidental timing, the state of Texas has a similar bill, Senate Bill 21. It's passed their state Senate already, and today it's being heard in their House. So it's sort of like a reverse situation that we have. So the bill allows for the state treasurer, there's some definitions there in the definition section, to put some guidelines around safely securing digital assets or precious metals. You'll see there's a line on line 14, page 1, qualified custodian. So there's some rules around who can custody the assets. There's a definition for a secure custody solution. And the options for custody are second page, line 9 for digital assets, and second page, line 15 or line 14 for precious metals. And they're basically very similar, so that the state treasurer can use a secure custody solution or purchase through an exchange traded product. That's probably the most likely. So we know Fidelity is one of our state's largest employers, and they have an exchange traded product for Bitcoin, which is one of the digital assets that this would cover. And there's some simple guidelines here. So second page, line 4, I just want to point you to, we're not talking about meme coins or silly tokens. We're talking about world-class digital assets that have a market capitalization of at least 500 billion, so $500 billion, average over the previous calendar year. Now, currently the only digital asset that would meet that requirement is Bitcoin, but that could change in the future as other digital assets grow in liquidity. I think Ethereum is about 250 billion at the present valuation. Bitcoin is at 1.7 trillion, so it's about 2/3 of the digital asset market. And then on line 7, it puts a ceiling on what percentage the treasurer can invest. It's 5%. So the history of this bill, it went through House Commerce. We simplified it. There were some other things in there that we took out, dealing with stable tokens and staking. So we simplified the bill. It came out of Commerce, bipartisan. It passed on the House floor, no debate. It went to Ways and Means, second committee. It came out of Ways and Means, basically on a partisan split, and then passed the House a second time with no debate on the floor. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'm
Next,
sure you'll
also the representative. I'll just ask, again, this is just enabling, there's no shalls in this.
There's no
It's just-
shalls.
It allows the treasurer, if she thinks in the best interest of the state to invest in these assets, then it gives her the ability to invest, but only 5% of the funds.
Up to 5%,
maximum, right?
right.
That's the maximum she can do.
And the idea, so when in investment portfolios, there's something called the Sharpe Index, which it balances risk versus returns. And there's been studies that if you add digital assets to your portfolio at a small amount and you rebalance regularly, so if Bitcoin goes up, you sell some of it and you spread it out to the rest of your assets. If it goes down, you purchase a little more, you rebalance. If you do that over time, you get a higher return over not having it in. And it's a way to, this is a brand new asset class, and it's developing. Our federal government now has a Bitcoin strategic reserve, believe it or not. So as I said, these are world-class assets. They're not game tokens. So.
Anything else? Senator Roosevelt.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. Given that the treasurer's 3 guidelines for investing the state's cash reserves are number 1, safety, number 2, liquidity, and number 3, return.
Mm-hmm.
do you think that how likely do you think it is that $100 million of our cash and rainy day fund might be invested in these two assets?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we worked with the treasurer on this bill. We had two separate meetings. We worked on the amendment that I mentioned to simplify it. So she's had input. I don't want to speak for the treasurer, but we did not have a hard resistance against the bill. That she mentioned that her colleagues around the country are discussing these concepts, and it's become a topic of interest. You mentioned the three qualifications. Safety and returns are two that come to mind. The limit on how many dollars the U.S. government can print is unlimited. There's no limit to how many dollars can be printed, and we've seen record inflation over especially the last few years. It's not completely going away. It may come back. So the idea of protecting the purchasing power, the value of taxpayer dollars, and having returns that beat inflation, because if you don't beat inflation, you're losing money. That's the idea behind adding these other assets that tend to be hedges against inflation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Further questions from the committee? Senator Finn.
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. I appreciate that this is enabling legislation, and I kind of share some of my concerns with my colleague. On page 2, line 4, with the capitalization over 500 billion, just doing some quick research, only Bitcoin and occasionally Ethereum fit this threshold of the 500 billion. So that could lock us into, very limited crypto options. Is there any concern about that?
Yeah, so it has to be the average over the previous year. So it can't just be one little spike above and back down. It has to be sustained over the previous year, averaged out. And so I think that puts so I mentioned the Texas bill, Senate Bill 21, they have the same $500 billion threshold in it. You can imagine if we didn't have a threshold, at least the public appearance would be that the treasurer could gamble with tokens that kind of come and go, right? We want to put a serious threshold, and I think 500 billion. We considered raising it to 750, but I think 500 billion is a good position, and it allows other digital assets to, over time, their market capitalization could grow, and it would bring them into that threshold and then under consideration, right? It doesn't require anything. It's just this is what we can look at that we consider safe enough.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Senator Roosevelt.
Thank you. I do have another question. There's been a lot of discussion, as you know, and you've been very supportive, and thank you, to trying to get more of the public deposit investment pool invested in New Hampshire's physically located banks. And recently, the treasurer put out some guidance saying that those banks had to be capitalized of at least $2 billion. Just wonder how you feel about this 500 billion versus 2 billion from banks.
Yeah, so the 500 billion doesn't have anything to do with how much we would invest. It's just
No,
yeah, right. That's just the market capitalization of that digital asset, right? So it's just the threshold. That number doesn't play into how much we would consider investing, right? That 5% number is more like it.
Right.
So both of these types of instruments, they're bearer assets. So you can physically take custody and no one else has custody, right? And then you can also trust a custodian, a third party, to custody it for you. And potentially in the near future, that could be our state chartered banks could be qualified custodians. There's some things moving at the federal level, some clarity coming at the federal level, and that's expected to come fairly soon. So if you're talking about our banks in the state, they could potentially play a role as a custodian of the digital assets. Does that answer your question? Maybe I misunderstood.
Ryan Hale's going to be testifying too. If you want to have a
Okay.
Conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions from the committee? Thank you, Representative.
All right, thanks so much.
Ryan, come on up.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, second time in 2 weeks. Chairman Lang, honorable members of the Ways and Means Committee, thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony. Provide testimony today for the record. My name is Ryan Hale, Vice President of Government Relations for the New Hampshire Bankers Association. Represent 40-member banks operating across the state, employing around 6,000 employees who live and work in communities throughout New Hampshire. While we do not take a formal position on House Bill 302, we appreciate the committee's thoughtful work on this evolving topic and would like to offer a few considerations. First, as the sponsor indicated, the bill authorizes investment in digital assets. This is a sector currently under review at the federal level. Congress is considering legislation that would establish a regulatory framework for stablecoins. And given the pace of these discussions and the likelihood of federal legislation passing in the near term, we've been told as early as the end of the year, the committee may wish to consider how best to align state investment policy with emerging federal standards. Doing so could help ensure consistency and avoid potential compliance challenges should national rules shift. Second, we'd like to highlight the role that public deposits currently play in supporting New Hampshire's economy. Public monies of the state, when held in local banks, are actively used to finance mortgages, small businesses, business loans, infrastructure projects, and other initiatives that benefit our communities. Should HB 302 lead to reallocation of those funds into digital assets or precious metals, particularly if held out of state, there may be an impact on the availability of capital within the state. As I think you're all aware, through some legislation over the past years, our member banks are proud to serve as safe, well-regulated stewards of public funds. They meet rigorous capital and collateral standards and remain deeply embedded in local economies. Ensuring that public deposits continue to contribute to in-state lending and investment is an objective we believe aligns with state's broader economic goals. And then finally, if the committee elects to move forward with expanding investment authority, we respectfully suggest that appropriate safeguard, such as collateralization requirements, be considered similar to those currently applied to banks holding state funds. This would help maintain consistency and protection of taxpayer dollars, regardless of investment vehicles. Again, I thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony today, and I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have. And if I correct the question you had, Senator, about the role that banks could play, is that correct?
Yes.
So I think a lot of it depends on the guidance that ultimately comes out at the federal level. There's a lot that's happening, not just in stablecoin, but I think in digital assets as a whole. There are two bills currently being debated in Congress that specifically apply to stablecoin. One's called the Genius Act and the other's called the Stable Act. One's in the Senate and one's in the House. Again, we fully believe that there will be some form of that legislation that will pass by the end of the year. I know our national association, the American Bankers Association, is actively engaged, not taking a position, but actively engaged in that debate. So I think a lot will depend on what transpires in that debate and what eventually ends up passing.
Oh,
Thank you. So as I understand it, Bitcoin is not backed by anything except what people think it's worth on a particular Okay, but stablecoin would be backed by the US dollar?
That's one form. Usually, my understanding when it comes to stablecoin, it's pegged to an asset. In this case, the fiat or the U.S. dollar. But it could be, other forms could be pegged to another type of asset.
Okay, but it would be backed.
Yep, to hold a stable value.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Further questions? Senator Benton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question. So the bill defines secure custodian solution, but I have some concerns about oversight and accountability, especially with third-party custodians.
Mhm.
Can you shed any light on those?
As third-party custodian, so it does list federal and state chartered banks as a qualified custodian. We look to our federal regulators for the guidance, federal and state. Usually, it'd have the federal regulators come up with the guidance, the requirements. We look to those, and then I think that does fall down to where for the state chartered entities. As far as the other regulated entities, I know non-depository trust companies, very similar, have federal oversight, state oversight. But again, I think we look to those. As far as the other, I think I'm not prepared to answer as far as those other types of custodians. But for our standpoint and understanding, our regulated entities, we do look to the regulators.
Can I follow up?
Hope that.
So in this bill, and I probably should ask Prime Sponsors, who monitors the performance of this? It'd be the treasurer. But how would losses be reported or mitigated in this?
That would be probably a good question for either the treasurer or the prime sponsor.
Other questions? Seeing none. Again, you, Ryan, you take this as strictly enabling language that the treasurer makes the ultimate decision on whether to invest or not invest. There's no mandate that we must invest, but as this technology with what's going on in DC and matures, this would just to give her the option of again, holding certain assets either in digital or precious metals, but not mandate that she do any of that.
Correct. That's our read of the legislation. It's not a mandate. It's just authorizing.
And currently, like now, when the treasurer invests, she has the obligation to monitor our investments regardless of where they're put now, right? So again, if a given asset fund tanks, we have to deal with that just like we would if a digital currency tanked, right? It would be, in theory, the same analog.
I would believe that would be the case.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further questions? Seeing none. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on House Bill 302? Yeah, come on up. Feel like you were nice in the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm Representative Tom Schamberg. I serve on the House Ways and Means. It's my 10th year there. And when we had this bill before us, it was the minority members of the committee felt that this bill is an unnecessary bill, since the state treasurer is our financial expert. She already has the power under current law to invest in precious metals. She has outside consultants that guide her on how our taxes are and our revenue is invested. And we felt on the minority that she is more of the expert in how investments should be invested for the state. And we see this as a limiting factor by putting this 5% on. You never know what the future is going to hold when all of a sudden maybe it needs to be a 10% investment that the state should get involved in precious metals. So The present law allows her to do this, and that was why the minority of the committee felt that they couldn't support this bill.
Questions from the committee?
I just have one.
Again, Senator Roosevelt first.
Thank you. Does she currently have the authority to invest in Bitcoin?
She has authority to invest in whatever her consultants will advise that they will give her. And happy birthday.
Thank you.
Any further discussions? So again, my question was, I think it was my take, and just tell me if I'm wrong, the idea behind the 5% was Senator Roosevelt listed off the three things she has to manage that in order to do investments in the state of New Hampshire. My reading of the bill and that 5% was to protect regarding, that she doesn't go all in on Bitcoin and then it tanks and the state's screwed. We just lost $2 billion, right? And so the idea was to limit the risk, but allow it to occur. But we'd also possibly benefit from the growth. And it was a combination factor. Do you not read it the same way?
No, I don't. I feel that the treasurer presently does not have other established limits, percentage limits on how she can invest the monies of the state. She goes by the consultants that she has hired, outside consultants. And this is a limiting factor.
Okay.
Question. Thank you. When I've talked with the treasurer about this bill, she has said to me, and I wish she was here, that she could not invest, and I think because of the safety, liquidity, and return in that order, she could not invest the state's cash reserves or the rainy day fund, but only smaller private funds. Do you know approximately how much in total those would be
I'm
from your
sorry.
10 years on Ways and
I'm sorry, Senator, you'd have to talk to the financial expert.
Okay.
We have the
Thanks.
treasurer. I'm now at the treasurer. Come up, the treasurer.
Oh, they are here? Okay.
She's right there. Thank you, Tom. You may. I have nothing else to beat you up over. Just introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Lauren Warner. I serve as the Deputy Treasurer for the State Treasury Department. Good morning, I'm here. If you have any questions, certainly, I can take them, bring them back to the Treasurer if I don't know the answer. But I know, Senator Rosenwald, just to kind of remark on your last comment, you are correct in the terms of when you had spoken to the State Treasurer, essentially accounts that could qualify for this bill would essentially be some of our state trust fund accounts that are required to remain in perpetuity. So long-term investments could potentially use this sort of investment vehicle for the digital assets or precious metals, but not money within the rainy day fund or traditional general funds.
Any other? Good, keep going.
Approximately how much money is that?
And I apologize, I do not know off the top of my head the total amount of the trust funds, but I could find that out and get that back to you all.
Thank you.
Further questions from the committee? You also see this as enabling language versus mandates. So again, if the treasurer felt it was in the best interest of the state, this law would allow her to be able to do it. But if she also thinks it's a bad idea for the state, she doesn't have to do it.
You are correct, Senator, yes. We met with the prime sponsor of this bill, and due to the fact that it is simply enabling may, not shall, the Treasury doesn't take a position on it and feels it wouldn't require the Treasury to invest in such funds, but as the sponsor said, allows it as a potential option in the Treasurer's toolbox if they felt, based on working with our current investment advisor that's held through a state contract. We work with them on a regular basis to determine, what accounts, what investment vehicles might be beneficial to the state at that time, and it's reassessed on a regular basis.
So the last thing I'm going to ask about, so it talks here about qualified custodians. And I know that one of our primary investment people are Fidelity. And they also allow for a Bitcoin and would qualify as a qualified custodian. So it fits within our current model that we're doing already in the state. If the treasurer chose to do it, there's already somebody there that we already have a trusted relationship with. Is that accurate?
Yes, I would think, so we would work essentially if the treasurer opted to invest in digital assets based on this legislation, we would work with our current investment advisor, who we hold a contract with. They would have contracts and agreements with certain digital currency providers, and they would be used as custodians in that case. I would assume Fidelity could potentially be one of them.
Great. Further questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wishes to speak on House Bill 302? Keith, did you want to come back up and answer a question?
I just wanted to clarify that 5% threshold. The original version of the bill was 10%. And we amended it down to 5%. That language was passed by the treasurer. She got to view the language before we submitted the amendment. And there was no real discussion about whether it should be 5, 10, or unlimited. I think 5 is the correct number. BlackRock recommends a 2% allocation into Bitcoin because it's an uncorrelated asset. It does things differently than the rest of the market. So if stocks go up, Bitcoin might stay flat. If stocks go down, Bitcoin might go up. So it kind of helps the overall risk of the portfolio as a whole. So I think 5% is a good number, but leave it up to the committee.
Great, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing on House Bill 302 and entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
It's been moved by Senator Sullivan, seconded by Senator Murphy. Let's take up 302. I'd entertain a motion on.
Motion to ought to pass?
There's a motion about to pass by Senator Sullivan, seconded by Senator Murphy. Discussion on it.
I think it's too soon, given what the federal government is working on with stablecoin, which is backed by something. I'd like to know how much these other trust funds are worth, and what kind of money we could actually be putting in to this. I prefer a motion of re-refer myself.
Further discussion.
She's done a great job investing our cash. She's hired an investment manager, and I'm not sure what the need for this bill is.
Senator Murphy?
In my opinion, this is a good opportunity. It's enabling legislation. It just gives the treasurer one more thing to look at. And I don't think that giving other options is ever really a bad idea. Bitcoin isn't going away. It's only going up in value, at least in my experience. But if the treasurer feels differently than I do, then she doesn't have to invest in it. It's just empowering.
Further questions? Further? So again, I look at this as a no harm, no foul kind of bill. That it doesn't hurt the state, it doesn't help the state, but it does allow the treasurer to have more options. There's no mandate in this thing whatsoever, but it does give her something she currently doesn't have, which is the ability to invest in digital assets.
Some guardrails around it.
I'm sorry?
And some guardrails around it as well.
And we put some guardrails around about the number, what assets she can invest in, which protects the state, and have at least a $500 billion capitalization. And then at the same point, we also put a limit on how much she can put into these assets, recognizing possible volatility, so we don't put the state at risk. So again, I just see it as nothing more than gives her another tool. She may never use it. She may use it the day it's passed. I have no idea, but we trust her to invest $2 billion right now and make those right decisions. I think giving her this as a tool, we should continue to trust her, let her have this tool in her toolkit.
Thank you. I'm not opposed to this bill either because it is enabling legislation. I do have concerns, and I share them with my colleague, that I would like a little more time to look at it. I'm concerned about crypto-related theft remains a global issue, I think. And it's a squirrely marketplace, especially with precious metals. They're volatile, especially if the economy's stable. They're down, things like that. But it is enabling legislation, so I'm a yes on the out to pass motion.
Say two other things. One, we just heard testimony that she already has the authority to do this. And secondly, because there's only Bitcoin meets the requirements. To me, this is the government picking winners and losers, which we don't usually like to do. So I'm going to have to be a no vote, even though it's just enabling. I think it's a bit too early.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of OTP, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
4-1. Cindy, do you want to, you oppose consent?
I don't particularly oppose consent. because
So let's take a
the
motion.
idea of arguing this on the Senate floor would be putting people to sleep.
So let's take a motion for consent.
So moved.
It's been moved by Senator Sullivan, seconded by Senator Fenton. All those in favor of consent, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Ayes have it, 5-0. It's on consent, and I will take it out. Because it's on consent, and it means I don't have to do anything.
Chairman's prerogative.
So that's that bill. Next bill, let's take up 617. If you remember, 617 is the homestead bill. The place we left it last is that we adopted my amendment, and then we're having discussions about further amendment to the amendment. Right, so, it was right. So what we had talked about in just our general discussion was getting rid of the married couple language in lines 13 through 15, and then throughout the rest of the bill where it says married couple, just making changes to fit that. So in my conversations with some of my colleagues, there was some concern that 250 was too low, but 500 was the right number for the household. And so I offered a compromise to them at going to 350 for a single individual, but no more than 500 for the entire house. Would be a compromise. And again, I think we all agree we wanted to strike the married couple language to make it more consistent with modern times, and say something like in line 3, it says that notwithstanding paragraph 1, homestead exemptions totaling not more than $500,000 may be held or claimed, or $350,000 for a single person under this section, is what I would recommend we change that. We strike only one, add an S to exemptions to make it clear you're entitled to more than one. But if there is more than one, it still can't total more than 500,000.
So what was that?
So in section 3, I would change it to strike the word that says only one before homestead. Put an S on the end of exemptions on that same line. And then strike by a married couple and just say it may be held or claimed. And then and then go back to 350,000 for a single person. Does that make sense to everybody? And then we would adjust the rest of the bill to be consistent with that. There's one other, I think, place we have to change it. It's at the end of 27 and 28. And I would change that to say 350 for a single person, or and 500,000 for all persons with an interest therein, which is what is coming from section 1. That's how they classify it. Is that whoever has an interest in the household they have to prove their interest, but they allow it to go to 500,000. So does that make sense to everybody?
You're amending your amendment with the committee amendment.
Correct. We already adopted the amendment, but there was some discussion. We felt that we couldn't get a consensus to pass the bill because everybody thought 250 was too low for a single person, and that we had this issue of married people that, given the society nowadays, that didn't seem to be proper. And so we're amending my amendment to take care of those things. So, yes.
Well, I mean, I think there's sometimes where parent and child own a house
Right.
together.
Yeah.
I mean,
Could
so
be any number of,
it's not just people checking on, but I think that Senator Sullivan brought up a really good point whenever it was we heard this bill, that someone who's lived in a house for a long time has probably paid off their mortgage, and so does have a higher equity interest in it. And so I think going from 250 to 350 makes a lot of sense.
so Sonia, you ready for, I'll give you my written up, my marked up copy. How's that? All right. So I'm going to move that we make the following changes to the already adopted amendment, that on line 3, we change it to 350,000 instead of 250,000. On line 13, we strike only one and add an S at the end of exemptions. So it says exemptions, not exemption, singular. We strike on line 14 by a married couple. Change 250 to 350. Then on line 27, we strike the 250 and change that to 350. We strike 4, instead of saying a married couple, we say all persons with an interest therein, which is the same language that you see on lines 3 and 4 for the person to claim the single. And Sonia, I'll give you this so you have it. So that is there any other amendments that people want to consider? So I'm going to move those changes. So it's moved by Senator Lang, second by Senator Rosenwald, to further amend the bill after the previous amendment, 1403 was adopted. All those in favor of that further amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Ayes have it. We're on the bill as amended. And the motion is ought to pass now as amended. All those in favor of ought to pass as amended, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. I'll move consent. Been moved and seconded for consent. All those in favor of consent, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. It is on consent.
Mr. Chairman, just for discussion, when I was researching how other states do it, there are states that do not mention people at all. The homestead is the entity.
The house is the
Yeah.
house
So
is entitled, not the person.
right. So I thought that was an interesting.
Senator Sullivan, you want to take this one out?
Sure.
Can I say one other thing?
Yep.
I had a conversation with the Senate's legal counsel about this bill because I've lived in my house for 37 years, and so I no longer have a mortgage. And so I asked him if I would have to recuse myself, and might any other senator who also owned a house with no longer a mortgage. And he said, in his opinion, no, because unless there was this, claims upon us, it wouldn't come into play. So just the fact of no longer having a mortgage and having equity interest of 350,000, or in my case, 500,000, because I'm married, would not mean we'd have to recuse ourselves. So if anybody else has lived in their house as long as I have,
So
you don't have to worry.
we're down to have 2 bills left. 696 and 247. 696 will exec next week. I'm going to just get the amendment drafted so we all know what we're looking at. Again, we're going to do a wipe and replace and take the Senate position on that bill, which we've already voted 5-0 out of this committee. And I spoke to the sponsor. It does fix some problems with his bill. He doesn't take into account pilot programs as well as we do in the Senate position. So we allow a run out of pilot, and when a pilot expires, we require them to pick up the tax in their new pilot. So and the Senate, they didn't do that. They just said, once we pass this, even if you have a pilot, now you're subject to, which is problematic for towns and operators who have already entered into agreements. So anyway, so we'll take that up next week. 247, again, I'm holding on. If anybody has some emergent issue that they need, we've already passed a different version of that bill. So the bill is my recommendation hopefully is going to be ITL because we already passed 737 last week, which dealt with the same issue of towns opting in or opting out. So I'm using that bill strictly as a placeholder in case a senator has something they want to bring forward in Ways and Means and needs a bill to attach it to. We do a non-germane amendment and repurpose the bill. So I'm just holding it for that purpose. So pretty sure that's not going to happen, Senator Rosenwald. I'm not going to vote to raise the beer tax. But anyway, if there's some emergent issue that's come up and you want to use 247, come see me. We'll talk about it and see if we can get it scheduled and if we think it's something that needs a this year's solution rather than a next year's solution. So, anything else? I entertain a motion to come out of executive.
So moved.
It's been moved by Senator Sullivan, seconded by Senator Fenn to come out of executive. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We're out of executive session. The business of the day being done. We are adjourned.